Welcome to One Last Take, a podcast about seeing film from every angle. I'm Wes Skinner, and this episode is the latest in our monthly roundup of new releases, known as the good, the bad, and the underrated. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the good, the bad, and the underrated. It's been a long and busy month, and before we get started, I wanted to cover some final changes for the show moving forward. In trying to figure out the overall structure of this podcast, I decided that the best way to cover as wide a range of films and topics as possible will be through weekly episodes featuring reviews of everything I watched in the previous week. This will mean half of each episode will be focused on new releases, which will now be more up to date, and the other half will discuss whatever I'm watching in my free time. To transition smoothly, May will feature the last few episodes I already had planned for the podcast, with June 1st being the last episode of the good, the bad, and the underrated format. I'll be returning to some of the original stuff like double features and subgenre spotlights here and there, but I think for now, streamlining the process into more focused episodes will just be easier to digest and help simplify things for both myself and you as the listener. With that out of the way, let's talk about the movies that came out in April. Despite scattered release schedules and some maintenance at my local theater, I still got to see a lot of films in the past month, and April at the movies turned out to be, in some ways, the month I've been dreading. After a surprising 1-2 punch of January and February and the excitement of March's bigger releases like Hoppers and Project Hail Mary, April reminded me of why I often grow cynical about the modern movie landscape, especially early on in the year. It did, however, start off with a bang with one of my favorites of the year, which we'll get to, but then it just sort of puttered around in mediocrity before another movie finally restored my excitement in the final days of the month. So as always, we'll get started with the good, and for the most part, the movies in this category were just that. They were good. Nothing more, nothing less, with the big aforementioned exception and one of my current favorites of the year, Christopher Borgle's The Drama. The Drama poses a fascinating question. What if the love of your life had a secret so dark and so disturbing that it changed how you see them? You've already invested so much of yourself into the relationship, made so many beautiful memories, and you truly feel at home with each other. You've already let your walls down and you're comfortable enough to be uncomfortable with them. But then they tell you something you never knew about their past, and you simply can't make sense of it. Before going any further, consider this a spoiler warning for The Drama. I don't normally like to do this in these episodes, but honestly, this is kind of a hard movie to talk about if I don't spoil it. So skip forward to the next film using the times below if you don't want it ruined for you. You've been warned. The film stars Zendaya and Robert Pattinson as Emma and Charlie, an engaged couple whose imperfect but sweet history is told through a series of fast-paced flashbacks in the opening act, all while the two prepare for their big day. Abrupt edits take us in and out of these tender moments, reflecting both the nostalgia and panic that one is likely to feel with a wedding on the way. When we finally settle into an extended sequence, it sees Charlie and Emma seated with two of their closest friends at a wine tasting. What starts as an evening of reprieve amid the busy months slowly devolves into a drunken game of what's the worst thing you've ever done, which, as we all know, is always a good idea. Alana Haim's Rachel sets the bar fairly high, sharing a story of how she once locked a young boy in an abandoned trailer, while Charlie discusses his stint as a one-time cyberbully. Emma, however, is the one that brings the conversation to a screeching halt, when she admits, almost casually, that while she was young, desperate, and isolated, she once planned a school shooting. Watching this scene unfold in a theater immediately became the highlight of this year's movie-going experiences for me. I could almost feel the air get thinner from the dozens of gasps in the auditorium, and every piece of dialogue that followed came with this added tension due to the audience sharing the visceral shock of the other characters in that room. Rachel has the most explosive reaction, lashing out at a vulnerable Emma, while Charlie sits there befuddled, merely trying to make sense of it all. And maybe one of the film's most interesting choices is that it's his perspective and journey towards some form of acceptance or way to move forward that we focus on for the rest of the film. While we, like Charlie, long for more context and a reason to empathize with Emma so as not to view her as an outright villain, the film provides straightforward explanations and moves on. It's made somewhat clear why she ever had this thought to begin with, and it's made even clearer why she planned not to move forward with it. And that's it. Emma has found closure with these feelings and moved on. And the movie never bends over backwards to further exonerate her from having them. Along with Charlie, we have to either accept that this was a dark, scary human piece of her past, and that she's different now, or we choose to let it define her. I'm really glad Borgle keeps these things in the gray area, because making it any more black and white would remove the complexities and nuance that make it a fascinating movie to unpack. The rest of the film watches Charlie go from understandably confused to almost pathetically self-destructive, desperately scrambling to find a definitive moral conclusion. But the beauty of this movie is that there almost isn't one, and it's really about asking ourselves, can we be okay with that? Now, there are very valid criticisms of the film's use of such a grave subject matter as fodder for what is essentially a really dark romantic comedy. I don't fault anyone for being turned off by that, and for some, it might distract from the direction the movie actually wants to go. There's also cultural context, like Emma being a woman of color from the South, that goes completely unexplored. Personally, I found the approach perversely challenging, as it feels like the only secret this character could have that could trigger a heightened reaction from Charlie, but still have him consider staying in the relationship. And I'd even go further to say that the film's commitment to being a romantic screwball comedy, in spite of all these dark implications, is part of what makes it so interesting. Charlie's mental unraveling serves as a satire of where we as a society choose to draw the line with our own empathy, and grappling with that in the face of true love is a uniquely thought-provoking angle. Of course, none of it works without the two performances at the center, and as expected, Pattinson and Zendaya are great. Pattinson's portrayal of Charlie is the physical embodiment of neurotic anxiety and reminds us of his underrated comedic chops. If a fish flapping on dry land was a character, that's Charlie throughout most of this film. And it only works because Pattinson is still able to communicate how badly he yearns to be in love with Emma, in between his occasionally deranged acts of unhinged behavior. And like I said, Zendaya is fantastic as always, and plays it a lot straighter. She's sort of sidelined after her big reveal, but it only works to show that this character's personal journey happened before the film even started. She's worked through her demons, and the last step remaining was sharing her dark secret with Charlie, though probably not in the way she intended. She's essentially left anticipating the fallout and hoping for everything to turn out okay, as Charlie, for lack of a better phrase, figures his shit out. This will not be for everyone, but if you're on board for where this movie chooses to go after its first act, then it has more to peel back, discuss, and ruminate on than maybe any other movie so far this year. For that alone, it's one of my favorites. Now, I'm going to breeze through these next few because, like I said earlier, I feel a lot of these were solid and worth seeing, but there's not really much to say. First up is Lorne, a documentary about legendary SNL creator and the best comedy talent scout of all time, Lorne Michaels. It's a documentary about a captivating but notoriously withheld person, and that doesn't really change here. For SNL purists, it's worth checking out for behind-the-scenes footage and anecdotes from some of the show's heavy hitters. But outside of being charming and watchable enough, there just isn't really much to explore. Next up, we have Normal, another step in Bob Odenkirk's path to Liam Neeson status as a middle-aged badass action hero. He's reliable as always as an interim sheriff in a seemingly harmless town with dark secrets. The movie clearly wants to be a comedy as much as it wants to be an action movie, but I think it's far more successful as the latter, considering most of the jokes fell flat for me. Still, it moves along well enough that any flaws are pretty easy to forgive. Then we have yet another take on Shakespeare's classic Hamlet. You know, I thought I was Hamleted out after last year's Hamnet, but apparently I still had a little room left for this South Asian modern twist on the tale. Riz Ahmed is powerful and captivating as always, and the fresh cultural angle adds something entirely unique, especially in a set piece involving a dance that's both extremely tense and mesmerizing at the same time. My only real issue with this movie is that its commitment to using the dialogue from the original text kind of robs it of more opportunities to further explore that cultural perspective. Still, it's one of the best versions of the story I've seen in a while, but now I think I'm good on Hamlet for the next decade or so. Alright, and unfortunately, we've come to that time in every one of these episodes where I have to talk about the bad of the month. And honestly, I've kind of been itching to talk about this first one because it left me confused, irritated, and utterly exhausted, to the point where I actually walked out of the theater with about 10 minutes to go. Look, I'm not proud, but I just couldn't do it. And that movie is none other than Illumination Studios' Super Mario Galaxy movie. The movie is, of course, the follow-up to the 2023 smash hit Super Mario Bros. Movie, and I'll start there because I caught up with it the night before to give myself an idea of what to expect from the sequel. The original, as I anticipated, was a pretty straightforward and inoffensive exercise in nostalgia mining and IP exploitation. Countless Easter eggs and nods to the games are strategically placed every few minutes, which was enough to distract me from how painfully mediocre the rest of it was, which I'm sure was the intention. Aside from a blue star that gleefully recited morbid dialogue, the humor fell completely flat, but it was pretty looking enough and moved at a quick enough pace that it was hard to really have too many issues with it. That is to say, nothing really stuck with me, good or bad, about the entire experience. It just sort of washed over me. Now, if the first one was a single rain cloud carrying a forgettable drizzle, the Super Mario Galaxy movie is a hurricane of loud noises and bright colors. It felt like a theme park ride from hell where the speed is stuck at the highest setting, and instead of stopping, I was just strapped in for 90 minutes straight. My surroundings are changing constantly, the plot is recalibrating every 2 minutes, and by the time I can make out another familiar image, the ride whips me around a corner to the next assault on my senses. Meanwhile, I can practically hear a producer screaming in my ear asking if I'm having fun. The answer is no, sir. I am overstimulated and would like to get off this ride. This movie is representative of a trend in modern filmmaking, particularly with IP, where both the action and storytelling move at a breakneck speed, and the plot feels like it's almost making it up as it goes along, refusing to slow down or let anything resonate. To a lesser extent, I felt this way about last year's Superman, a movie I really wanted to like but couldn't keep up with, leaving me completely disconnected. You could argue this is just a preference of mine, but if you write everything down that happens in that movie, it's hard to deny it looks more like a season of television than a feature-length film. Well, little did I know that would be child's play compared to what Super Mario Galaxy has in store. A movie that has multiple character introductions, exposition dumps, and action sequences in the first 10 minutes. The big reveal of fan favorite dinosaur Yoshi is more or less the equivalent of Mario saying, "Oh hey, you're a dinosaur. I like you." Later on, we have a similar scene featuring the anticipated arrival of Glenn Powell as Star Fox. And again, "Hey, you're a Fox pilot. That's cool. I like you." And we're back on the hell ride. There is no mounting of stakes, no building of tension, just problems arriving to get quickly resolved, and then on to the next thing. It's doing backflips for your attention while offering nothing of substance. It's bad enough these voice actors, save for maybe Powell, sound like they're just going through the motions, or maybe taken hostage under duress, I don't know. Jack Black returns as Bowser, who is trying to make amends for being a distant father. Yep, you heard that correctly. And Black puts way less emphasis on the voice and sounds like he's just being himself this time around. I don't know, it was really confusing. And he's the closest to having anything resembling a character arc, as everyone else is just sort of oohing and ahhing at the sights and sounds, like they clearly expected the audience to be doing. I guess if I had anything nice to say, it's that the visuals are even better than in the first, but it's almost infuriating knowing that these animators worked themselves to the bone to deliver this kind of artistry, when the screenwriter seemingly just jotted down everything Nintendo or the studio told them had to be in the script and called it a day. By the time we get to our fourth boss battle at the end, which is yet another excuse to throw a familiar character on screen, I decided to respectfully bow out. I couldn't do it anymore. I was tapped out and had already forgotten everything I just watched unfold in the last 10 minutes because I was still processing the 10 minutes before that. I needed solace, I needed peace, so I left. And if that negates the validity of my opinion, then so be it. But in that moment, I had to be true to myself, and I knew whatever happened in those last 5 minutes was not about to change my mind. Now, I find the discourse about this movie pretty interesting. You have critics on one side who hate it, some even more than I do, calling it worse than AI slop. On the other hand, you have fans saying that it isn't that bad, and some even liking it better than the first. So as much as I personally believe we shouldn't settle for mediocrity, even in silly kids movies, this clearly worked for some people. And if that's how you feel, I don't want to take that away from you. But I think it's important to not blindly dismiss negative criticism of these movies as quote-unquote taking it too seriously. I just feel that this mindset has resulted in an overall drop in the quality of children's entertainment, at least from a storytelling perspective. Look no further than the lackluster output of Pixar over the last 10 years, or these live-action Disney remakes that somehow keep getting worse as evidence. I'm okay with bright, colorful nonsense coexisting with family films with real depth, but if we throw it all under one blanket of who cares, it's for kids, it could get to a point where studios are no longer incentivized to provide a platform for artistry. But as with anything, only time will tell. And here's to hoping Toy Story 5 does something new and thoughtful with its beloved IP. Next up, we have another animated feature that, at least for me, fell short of expectations. It's called ChaO. Produced by Studio 4C, it's a bizarre little fairy tale set in an alternate present where humans coexist with mermaids, and it follows a young man who is arranged to be married to the mermaid princess. He finds her fishy appearance and their cultural differences difficult at first, but eventually learns to appreciate her as they get to know each other. Now, I want to go easy on this one because there is at least a ton of craft and creativity on display with just about every frame. Even if I didn't totally gel with the character designs or the characters themselves or the story. The studio has made things I've liked, like Tekken Concrete and last year's All You Need Is Kill. Unfortunately, this one just feels like a comedy that isn't too funny with drama that's hard to invest in. It's worth seeing for any animation purists out there, but it doesn't do anything that isn't done better in other animated films. Next up, it's time to talk about the pretentiously titled Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Leading up to its release, I wanted to be cautiously optimistic, but the marketing just rubbed me the wrong way. It was sold as sort of a reinvention of the classic Mummy story, but from every trailer I saw, it kind of just looked like a collection of tropes ripped from other horror series, specifically Exorcist and Evil Dead. Well, now that I've seen it, I can honestly say, yeah, that's pretty much all it is, which is no surprise given that Cronin was the recent director of an Evil Dead movie. No, horror has always been a genre that borrows from itself, and it helps that it has a massive archive to pull from. Unfortunately, when nothing is done to add a unique spin on those borrowed elements, it kind of just turns into this exhaustive experience. The only time I had hope for this movie was in its opening act, where young Katie is groomed and kidnapped while her family is in Egypt. The mystery behind it is intriguing at first, and pretty unlike anything I've seen in a demonic possession movie, let alone a mummy movie. But it isn't long before we flash forward 8 years and Katie resurfaces, found alive in a sarcophagus and delivered back to her family. Rather than unraveling the promising mystery set up in the opening, the film becomes a series of gross-out moments as Katie contorts her body, shouts obscenities, and spews all sorts of liquids. Sound familiar? Same here. The gore is executed well enough, but I think where Cronin fails here is in a complete lack of tonal control. If you want to make a movie full of nasty scenes, they need to have a clear goal. Are we supposed to laugh at how absurd this is? Are we supposed to be disturbed? This movie can't really decide, and because of that, it falls entirely flat. For example, there's a scene where Katie's parents, played to the best of their abilities by Jack Rayner and Leia Costa, are hauling the newly discovered and now wheelchair-bound Katie up the stairs. The wheels clunk against the old wood loudly with every step, and it goes on and on and on. Part of me was wondering if they were aiming for a comedic bit, but when it involves a traumatized child and the previous scene just showed us these parents collapsing to the ground at the news of their daughter's survival, it feels a little wrong to now be laughing at this awkward, drawn-out moment. So what are we even doing here in the first place? And that's sort of how I felt throughout this entire movie. It wants to shock you in over-the-top ways while maintaining an emotional attachment to the drama. And while it's definitely possible to push this juxtaposition to the extreme, I don't think Cronin has the deft hand to pull it off. He's too busy pulling off toenails and spamming split diopter shots to ground this with any tangible substance. Oh, and did I mention it's over 2 hours long for some reason? And we do eventually get answers to the mystery, but they're not that intriguing and really don't matter much to where things go, except for one final scene that feels tacked on at the end. To be honest, I was more thrilled during the new Evil Dead Burns trailer that played before it than I was during the entire movie. Here's to hoping that that'll offer a better experience. Now we're rounding out the bad with a pun that I promise is only a little intended, with the Michael Jackson biopic, Michael. From its production credits, including most of the Jackson estate, to the flashy jukebox-style trailer, I was pretty sure going into this that the movie wasn't going to tackle anything involving the controversies that dominated the coverage of the pop superstar throughout the 90s until after his passing. So I wasn't remotely surprised or at all disappointed when I learned that the movie starts with his troubled childhood in Gary, Indiana, and ends in 1988. What I was disappointed by, however, was this movie's inability to mine anything of substance outside of, wow, that Michael was really talented, huh? The movie's depiction of Michael's life is essentially the tale of a sweet boy full of light and talent, with a loving mother, evil father, and some cardboard cutouts for siblings, who achieves greatness by gifting his light to the world, freeing him from the clutches of the past. Oh, and did I mention there's a CGI monkey named Bubbles? In case you can't tell, this movie has no interest in digging between the Wikipedia bullet points to develop any of these people into actual characters. No, it must be said, Jafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, is phenomenal in the title role. And there are certain shots where I was almost convinced I was looking at Michael himself. But he isn't given much to do outside of being fearful of his father, Joe Jackson, or playing the hits and feeling himself on stage. And I appreciate that they aren't afraid to expose Joe for the monster he was, but the great Coleman Domingo feels like his wings are clipped in portraying him. There's zero nuance to the character, so the weight of his cruelty isn't felt nearly as much as it should be. Now, the few times I was able to give the movie what it wanted from me, which is to turn my brain off and enjoy the pretty lights and sounds, I couldn't help but be in awe of some of the recreations of Michael's performances. This is some of the best concert stuff I've seen in a non-concert film in a while. It's just a shame they couldn't muster a deeper narrative to tether it to. But now it's time for my favorite part of the episode, where we get to talk about the underrated. And we're starting off with the stoner comedy streaming hit Pizza Movie. It stars Gaten Matarazzo and Sean Giambroni as college outcasts and best pals in need of a night of reprieve from bullies and schoolwork. They find the key to unlock their special evening when a mysterious drug called mint falls from the ceiling of their dorm room. With the help of a single Google result, they navigate the various phases of the drug, but soon discover they're in need of one key ingredient to avoid a bad trip: pizza. At face value, this is simply a derivative mashup of every college movie ever made and that one drug scene from 21 Jump Street. But in actuality, it's a feature-length playground for directors Brian McElhaney and Nick Kosher to throw every absurdist sketch idea they've cooked up over the years throughout their internet career as comedy duo Britannic. Matarazzo and Giambroni understand and communicate the director's surreal brand of humor perfectly, inhabiting a heightened world where it feels like anything could happen at any moment, and channeling the shock and awe the audience feels while watching it unfold. The punchlines kind of play like jump scares, though instead of creating a sense of dread for what's around the corner, you're bracing yourself to laugh at a joke before you even know where it's going to land. Unlike most comedies, Pizza Movie doesn't really slow down, even in its most sincere moments. There are enough surprises, fun characters, and believe it or not, exploding heads for a whole trilogy of these things packed into a tight 95-minute runtime. I recommend this to anyone who, like myself, has grown tired of the modern comedy landscape and is looking for something fresh. Also, check out Britannic's non-feature work while you're at it. You will not be disappointed. Next up, we have a movie that I was so fascinated by I saw it twice. See, while excitement was building for the long-awaited Devil Wears Prada 2, another Anne Hathaway movie hit theaters, and it might just be my favorite performance of hers to date. The movie I'm talking about is David Lowery's Mother Mary. Hathaway stars as the titular pop star in crisis, who seeks to make amends with her estranged friend and costume designer Sam, played by Michaela Cole, in time to make her a dress for her big comeback show, after a mysterious accident brought her last tour to a screeching halt. The film starts as an emotional standoff between these two magnetic forces, with Mary clearly desperate and ashamed while Sam feigns amusement to disguise the pain of feeling abandoned by Mary years ago. With lyrical dialogue and powerful performance from both leads, the first hour or so feels like a stage play. It's only through the occasional flashback that we're taken out of the central location, a barn/studio that almost has enough character to make it the third lead. The highlight of this first section of the film is a dance scene where Mary shows Sam choreography that, per Sam's request, is performed without music. Hathaway's performance in this sequence can only be described as primal, and it communicates so much that this character is going through emotionally as her body writhes and contorts in ways that resemble more of an exorcism than a traditional dance. As the tension builds between Sam and Mary, they eventually share eerily familiar experiences, introducing an element that elevates the movie into something else entirely. I'll stop here because I don't want to give too much away, but anyone familiar with David Lowery's work will see some recurring themes from past films. He combines a raw vulnerability that's genuinely rare to come by in studio filmmaking with genre elements that make the emotional components all the more tangible. This is probably what will forever isolate certain viewers from his work, while audience members like myself will be so compelled by it that they have to see it twice. None of it works without Cole and Hathaway giving their all to these performances, and they are both outstanding. I've said a lot about Hathaway already, but Cole's sharp, commanding presence and her ability to communicate pain and heartache with subtle facial twitches through it all just makes it impossible to look away from her. I haven't even mentioned the production side of things, which is top-notch all around. The visuals, as with every Lowery joint, are stunning and awe-inspiring while still feeling real. He manages to find as much beauty in the planks of wood in Sam's studio as he does in Mother Mary's lavish, large-scale performances. Speaking of, the sound design in these scenes makes you feel like you're at front stage at a concert, and the music by Jack Antonoff and Charlie XCX feels moody and catchy enough to create a believable backdrop for a pop star on this level of fame and celebrity. Lowery once again creates a work of art that pushes actors into bold new territory and is at times perplexing and mesmerizing, yet always beautiful. I'm still unpacking this movie's themes of celebrity worship, loneliness, the grief of a broken relationship, and ideas about how we take pieces of ourselves and put it into our art, only to lose control of it the minute it's shared with the rest of the world. In case you can't tell, this movie moved me in many ways, some of which I can articulate, and some that I simply can't. And to quote a self-aware line from the film, you might find some of these metaphors exhausting, but if you're open to finding your own way through the beautiful imagery and hypnotic sounds, you might find this one worth watching and rewatching yourself. My last film for the underrated category, as well as today's episode, is Exit 8. This is an adaptation of a video game of the same name that I wasn't particularly familiar with at all before going into it. It features a man inexplicably trapped in a subway terminal featuring the same corridor over and over again. He soon learns the only way out is to find anomalies in the corridor, and by turning back around anytime he sees one. If he doesn't, he's right back at exit 1. And by the time he reaches exit 8, he'll finally be free to go. What I'm assuming is an embellishment of the movie's design is a subplot about this man's fear of becoming a father, just after his partner tells him she's pregnant. It's kind of a big swing, but it really works, as it ties together this theme of fearing failure. And in lesser hands, it all might come off pretty repetitive, but just when you think you understand the formula, there's a subtle twist, a change in the pattern, an anomaly, if you will, that keeps things moving in interesting ways. I don't have much else to say on this one except that it's tight, engaging, and I think it benefits from knowing as little as possible going into it. And that just about does it for the good, the bad, and the underrated for April of 2026. It was a month that was kind of all over the place, but it wasn't without its gems that I'll remember for the rest of the year. For the next show, I'll finally be releasing my double feature of Fists and Philosophy, and before wrapping up the month and moving on to the new format, I'll try and sneak one more episode in for May. Don't forget to follow me at one_last_take on Letterboxd for more movie thoughts. And whether you're currently one of my 6 devoted listeners, or you're discovering this years from now buried in the algorithm purgatory on Spotify or YouTube, I want to thank you for your support of the show. This has been an incredible outlet for my obsession, and I appreciate you using your valuable time to hear my endless thoughts on it. Well, that's all I've got for today. We'll see you next time.